Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of West Bend Plan Commission meeting for March 2nd. Note that we do have a quorum with Commissioner Gannon absent and excused. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I'll note that we have about 5 items on the agenda, the first being approval of the minutes, the regular Plan Commission meeting minutes of February 2nd.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Butchlick and Starl. Any questions or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on to 4, development proposals, A, site plans, number 1, SP-21-003, public hearing at 6 o'clock p.m. For a site plan to request a consideration to allow an oversized LED electronic message center for the monument sign at 2117 and through 2123 West Washington Street by Debbie Nelson of Jones Sign Company. The applicant is Payco Major of Major Dental Partners. The agent is Debbie Nelson. Jim.
Thank you. So back in March of 2020, the Plan Commission conditionally approved the site plan for a 2-story commercial building, which included a dental office. Oakbrook Dental has submitted a sign request for an oversized electronic message center. The sign itself conforms to the overall sign size. We are asking that the site plan be revised to show the minimum 5-foot setback as needed for the sign location from the property. Under the sign code 1748 10B2, we require electronic message centers to be 16 square feet or less. There is a provision in the code for the Plan Commission to allow for oversized signs for the consideration of that after a public hearing has been held. So Oakbrook is requesting the consideration for an exception to allow a 32 square foot sign. The request is based on the need for the visibility and legibility based on the DOT standards for traffic speed and also due to the physical design of the road for being a divided highway. The sign would be utilized for both tenants that are in that building, and the sign also does utilize a photocell to regulate the brightness based on the amount of light and the time of day. All property owners within 200 feet were notified of the public hearing. Staff received 2 inquiries with no objections. And if the Plan Commission finds the sign to be acceptable, staff would recommend approval with the condition that a ground sign permit be issued prior to the installation and that the site plan be revised to provide the adequate setback.
Thanks, Jim. This is a public hearing, so if anybody from the public would like to speak on this item, feel free to come on up. And when you do, if you could just state your name and address for us.
Sure. I can belt it out if that's okay with you guys. I'm Paco Major. I'm the owner of the property. I'm developing it, and I want to bring to light that I'd like to get this passed. A couple reasons. A few things come to mind. One, the other businesses in the area do have, in some cases, significantly larger signs than mine to begin with. 2, if we're doing an electronic screen, as you guys can see from the plat over there, we're right by the the map that you just had up. That's it right there. We're the gray business there. We're right next to the highway. So when people get off, the DOT requirements or the recommendations are that somebody has 10 seconds to drive and see. And with it being not big enough, I'm afraid that won't be legible to people in a safe manner to drive past.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak on this item? Otherwise, we're looking for a motion to end the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. If there's no further public comments, all those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And I'll open it up to the commission if there's any questions for Jim. Otherwise, we're just looking for a motion to approve. I'm sorry. Yep, Commissioner Marischal.
So I have a question. Jim, with allowing these bigger signs, I know there are other businesses in the area that have smaller signs as well. Mm-hmm. And I understand we have a recommendation from the DOT's book about relating to the speed of the vehicles and the size of the sign. I imagine this is for, usually traffic signs. I know there's a lot of regulation on the size of the lettering and everything like that. But the question, Jim, is are we risking to see all those other businesses there, like the hair place, the card reading place, whatever, come back and have that same request?
Sure. I mean, we have the code set up that way. We have the minimum of or maximum of 16 square feet, and each sign we've taken as individual considerations. We've done this throughout the whole area along Washington Street that have the EMCs that are not or that exceed the 16 square feet. We have them on Main Street. So each one kind of has their own unique, I guess you could say, merit for an approval. That's why we take them separately for each request.
So every time that those requests will come back to the commission?
Yeah, as the
Okay.
code is set up right now, unless we would change the code to, change the requirement size from 16 square feet to some other requirement.
Yeah, no, I'm not looking for that, for a change in the code, no.
I'm kind of on Max's side here. I just don't want to open up a precedence, because all of a sudden you might have 4 other businesses come tomorrow, and then individually they have to come in front of us again if they want to, where we said you have this certain amount when they started, and now we're going bigger. So
Sure.
I guess they'd have to come back in front of the board.
Yeah, for any sign that is, any electronic message center that's over 16 square feet right now, per our code, has to come before the Plan Commission with this public hearing, just like what we're doing tonight.
When we
Hey.
talk about, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
When we talk about signs, we often talk about the proportionality to the building and the property size. This sign seems very large to me in comparison to the property and the width of the property. So I'm kind of agree with Mike and Max on this too. I'm having a harder time with this one.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I don't have an issue with allowing this. I'm just wondering if that's going to start a domino effect, and then we're going to see all these businesses come back and say that. And if they do, and we look at them, I don't think it's going to get to the point where also now we have so many of them, so maybe it should be the rule instead of the exception. But I just wanted to make sure that if those requests come in, that they come to the Plan Commission every time, and then we would be able to react to that if we need to make a change to the code in the future. I'm not looking for that right now. I just wanted to make sure the process would be coming back to the commission every time.
Yeah, as it's set up right now, we do.
That would be my only, how do I say this? If we okay this tonight, I don't have a problem with it either, but we have to give due diligence to anybody else that wants to come back in front of the board and say, hey, I want to get a bigger sign now also. So, and that's no problem, right?
Correct. That's why we
Public hearing, there'll be,
Correct. That's why we have the public hearing. That's why we ask for the justification for the sign request. Just to say that they need it because they want a bigger one doesn't necessarily mean that it's appropriate for the development or for the location.
Commissioner Dolick?
So at first I thought maybe, looking at the picture with the drawing of the man standing next to it, I thought, oh my, that's a huge sign. But the letter from the sign company indicates that it could have been 22 feet high.
Correct. Our code does specify that maximum height for a ground sign is 22 feet. In this case, this one happens to be, 14 feet.
Yeah, which is 22 feet. Okay, so the issue is not the height, it's the square footage, it's the total square footage contained within it? Or is it the square footage of the text, or?
It's the square footage of the electronic message center that's up for consideration. The sign itself complies. We allow 100 square
Oh,
feet
okay.
per side. The EMC itself is 32 of the total 8 foot 8 by
Sure.
11 foot.
So does that clarification help you two at all? Okay.
Jim, do you have an example of, or can you think of the top of your head of a sign that might be this size that we already have in the city and on what property?
Sure, I went through some of the other exceptions that we have. So signs that are around 32 square feet, we had Landmark Credit Union just down the road on Main Street here. They were at 33. Madden Law Office is at 30. That's just down on Washington. We have our Regner Park sign on Main Street. That's at 30 square
That's 30?
feet.
Okay, that'd be a
Correct.
good example. Everybody
Yep.
drives by there and kind of can see the,
Yep. All the Culvers, and they're at 30, just under 35 square feet. Burger King, they were at 21. So, I mean, we have ranges anywhere from, 20, 21, 22 square feet, all the way up to, let's see, a good comparison that I had was, we had Glacier Hills at 37. So, I mean, the largest one that we had was Fleet Farm, and that was at like 100. But granted, given the size of that one and the development for that. But most of them, I would say anywhere from, low 20s to mid 30s. We have a range in.
Yep, go ahead.
So for me, given the area, I appreciate the fact they're trying to keep the height of the sign lower, and I know the electronic message center is always, it comes before us quite often. I personally don't have an issue with this. I do like the fact that we have to review it because depending on the scenario or situation or location in the city, I think we need to do our due diligence on evaluating that, but in this setting, I'm okay with this.
I appreciate, Jim, your answer and being able to compare this sign to others that are out there. So that helped me a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for Jim? Otherwise, we are looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Starl Schmidt. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, and that passes. Thanks for coming out. And we'll move on to discussion items. We do have Phil Cosson, who is our rep with Ellers, who's here virtually. What I'll do is I'll read off both of items 1 and 2. We'll let Phil give us a breakdown and spiel. Then we'll go to the public hearing, and then we'll open it up to the commission for questions. So I'll read off those two items. First is a public hearing and approval of resolution designating proposed amended boundaries and approving a project plan amendment for tax incremental district number 10, City of West Bend. The applicant is the City of West Bend. Agent is the same. And number 2, a public hearing and approval of resolution designating proposed boundaries and approving project plan for tax incremental district number 15 by the City of West Bend, and the applicant is us as well. So with that, Phil, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Thank you, Mayor.
Nice to see your handsome face once again today, twice in a row. I'll let you take it away talking about 10 and 15.
All right. Thank you. For those that had to sit in through the joint review board this morning, this will be a little repetitive, but for the rest, it'll be new information. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to walk through both amendment to TID number 10 and then also the creation of TID 15 because they interconnect. And I'll show you that in a little bit. So we've been working for the last 6+ months with city staff on putting this together. Ended up being kind of a combination of needing to amend TID 10. The amendment for TID 10 is a little bit different than what you've done in the past, where we are actually subtracting parcels. And the reason we're doing that is to be able to fully realize the potential benefit of TID number 15 through a proposed development. And we'll go through that in a little bit. Unlike most amendments that are done for tax increment districts, there's really very little impact here. Really no financial impact at all to TID number 10. It's just a step we need to go through to remove parcels from a tax increment district, in this case, TID number 10. I'm curious, would it be better for me to share my screen, or should I just walk through what I have?
Does anybody have a preference? I mean, if it helps you explain things, just so we could follow along, if you want to pull it up, that might be helpful. So we can
Yeah.
see the map and what numbers you're referring to.
Certainly. All right, so I pulled up my screen, the 10 project plan. I'll walk through this in a little bit of detail. We do early in the tax increment district put together an executive summary, which really kind of lays out the history of TID 10, but then also what the purpose of this amendment is. So just to reorientate yourself, back in 2004, TID number 10 was created. It was a West Bend company site that became blighted after they had left. There was an agreement reached between Hendricks Development and the city to redevelop that site, and it was roughly 50 acres. Things really worked out very well initially. The cleanup of the site was taking place over time. We actually had a significant development that was occurring in TID 10, and there was good momentum. And then we hit the recession in 2008, 9, 10. At that point, TID 10 value that was created as a result of the TID had dropped in value, and we were experiencing, the city was experiencing shortfalls in cash flow. So back in 2012, it was allowed to what's called distress a TID, and we did that back in 2012, which all it did was allow for 10 additional revenue collection years. That amendment was put in place, so it went from a 27-year allowed TID to a 37-year allowed TID. With the understanding in working with the other taxing bodies, it would only take the time needed to support the redevelopment of this area. There is also a development agreement that has stayed in place with the Hendricks Development Group that calls for the developer to make annual shortfall payments if there are shortfall payments, and they've done that on a regular basis. And then on the back end of the TIF, they get their money back if there is excess increment. I'll go through that in the cash flow in a little bit. So that's what's happened up to this point. Again, this is really just to subtract 4 parcels, 2 owned by the city, 1 by the power company, and then also 1 additional parcel. And the idea is to subtract that so we can add that to the TID 15 area and generate new increment on those 4 parcels that are being removed. We've provided under expected termination of district that this district, holding everything constant, will close out by 2034, which is 8 years earlier than the allowed 37 years. So meaning we will have used 2 years of that potential 10-year extension. So that's good news, and we can maybe shorten that up if we see a little bit of additional development. As I indicated, there isn't a great deal of change to this district except for, if you go to the map on page 7, here's the district, which is a substantial district. You can see the boundaries here of existing TID 10, which included this area east of the Milwaukee River and north of Washington, East Washington Street. These are the parcels here that are going to be removed from TID 10 and then ultimately added to TID 15. So the rest of the district stays intact, no change. It's just removing those parcels at this time. The parcels information, and again, there's a series of maps that we need to show as part of the project plan. I'm not going to walk through each one of those, but for instance, this map shows the zoning. The map on page number 8 really shows the boundaries and parcels. It has the parcel numbers included. So there's a series of maps that are always required to be included in a TID project plan, and even though they don't have a lot of significance except for the one I showed you here. So the 4 parcels that are being removed, as I indicated, 2 are owned by the city of West Bend, one on West Washington, the second on Franklin Street. The Wisconsin Electric Power Company owns one of the parcels, and that's being removed from TID 10. And then another parcel, which is 415 Main Street, West Bend Brewing Building, is the only parcel that has value, $182,000 of value. Those are the 4 parcels being removed from TID 10 and will be added back to TID 15. So we ended up spending quite a bit of time doing an updated financial pro forma for TID 10. We thought it was really a good opportunity when you go through an amendment like this to kind of get everybody caught up to speed. That included this morning the Joint Review Board members, the other taxing bodies, to give them an update as well as what's happening in TID 10. On this page 18 of the project plan, you'll see in the middle of the page highlighted in yellow that there's $42.7 million of increment that has been generated since the beginning of this tax increment district. That's generating about $770,000 of revenue coming into the district. We show no new development occurring under value added, even though there is substantial room for development still within the existing boundaries, the remaining boundaries of TID 10, more to the north and east part of that TIF. But we do show a small amount of appreciation on a yearly basis, meaning the value is expected to go up a little bit each year. That results in the cash flow that is shown on page number 20 of the project plan. And this is really where I wanted to spend a little bit of time to kind of make sure that you're fully understand what's happening here. This tax increment district, as I explained, has a provision through a development agreement where the developer pays shortfall payments during the term where the debt is outstanding, with the expectation that they'll get reimbursed back over time as increment is available on an annual basis up to the amount that they've contributed. So they've contributed already $3.662 million. That's their contribution into the project for all those shortfall payments we had talked about over time that they have contributed. We're projecting out in 25 and 26 a small amount of additional contribution the developer would have to make because of shortfall payments that are out here. And then once much of the debt is paid off, which is really the middle of this page, these are the obligations related to the tax increment district. Once a lot of this is paid off, which is a substantial amount by 2027, 28, then you have a situation where there are funds available for distribution back to the developer, and that's this column right here, till they get back the full amount of what they have contributed. What we're projecting right now is that 2034 date that the developer will be paid back in full, the city will be reimbursed for all costs, and the district will be closing out at that point in time. So this amendment, which is a little bit unusual, has really no financial bearing at all on this cash flow. We're really pulling those four parcels out to attach to TID number 15 so that you can generate new increment in TID 15 versus TID 10. Since the development in TID 15 is a different developer than who did the development in TID 10. So that's the amendment. The rest of the project plan, we have to answer some questions that are laid out in the statute, like annex properties, property devoted to retail, kind of how this fits within the master plan of the city, and such. So we've answered all those questions through this process as well. And that's all in the project plan. So again, really this is more of a technical amendment so that we can, ultimately it'll benefit TID number 15.
Thanks, Phil. If you just want to keep rolling on to TIF 15, that'd be great.
Okay. All right, I pulled up the project plan for TIF 15. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so this is really what prompted the need to pull the parcels out of TID number 10. TID 15 is an arrangement that's being worked out between the city and HKS, which is a developer out of the Milwaukee area. They just put a little context in who they are. I shared with the Joint Review Board also today that if you get down in the Milwaukee area, they did the Kimpton Hotel down in the 3rd Ward, the Renaissance Hotel, the new one that just opened around Mayfair Mall, and a number of other developments, including housing developments in the 3rd Ward area as well. So they're a pretty prominent developer in the Milwaukee area, and pretty exciting development that they're presenting to the city. This will be what's called a redevelopment rehab district, meaning that it has the allowance of up to 27-year life. It's about 7.6 acres, and it's a pretty dense development, more dense than I think the city typically would see. The city is looking to make expenditures of about $9.8 million. For the existing development, there could be future costs and, through an amendment that are added at a later date, but this $9.8 million really supports the development that's being proposed. The developer is proposing $35 million new primarily upscale housing rental development. $35 million is the approximate amount that's been estimated. And if everything goes as planned, it'll take 24 of the 27 years to be able to pay this district back. There are substantial public costs, infrastructure costs that have been included here that I'll talk about a little bit that the city will really benefit from, in addition to obviously more individuals shopping and eating and visiting your retailers in the downtown. So the proposed boundaries of this are shown on page 7, and you can see here the boundaries. These are the parcels down here that were removed from TID number 10, and you'll see that this is where the first building is going to be in this area. So that generates a substantial amount of increment in TID 15. That's why it's been pulled out of TID 10. The second building will be in this general area, the West Bend, the brewery site here. And then the parcels to the north and west that are shown here would potentially be additional development in the future or redevelopment areas in the future, but nothing planned as part of this project plan at this time. The plan here, again, we have to show a variety of maps. The existing zoning is on page number 9. Existing land use is on page number 10. If you look at the land use, we have a park, utility, we have a vacant parcel, we have some business and commercial development along this way, and a little bit of commercial in this area. So that's the area that is going to be redeveloped. This is the parcel list, and in the yellow are the 4 parcels that are being removed from TID 10 that I went through earlier. In addition to that, I think there's an additional 8 parcels, 7 or 8 parcels that are 7 parcels that are being added that I showed you on that map earlier. Those are not highlighted in yellow. The total value of the base of 1.856 million under TIF, the taxes paid on that base value will ultimately be distributed to all the taxing bodies, and then the growth above that is the increment. So that's the parcel list that has been identified for this site. We We've done an analysis on equalized value and what's called the 12% test. I think I'll just quickly indicate that the city still has substantial capacity under the 12% test if the city wants to amend the boundaries of an existing district or create a new district. So this does not tap the city out by any means for the use of TIF. Projects. So we have gone through and done a list of projects, and as I indicated, there are several phases of projects here. So the first, under 2021, GeoBond 2021, there's $1 million. That's really a direct incentive to the developer. They're going to take on the acquisition and cleanup of a number of issues that surround primarily the site owned by the power company. And instead of the city being involved in that, the city wants the developer to take that on and get reimbursed back. The Riverwalk north of Washington, there's a cost associated with that. That's a very important element for the developer as well. That walkability into downtown they view as a strong marketing component to their development. There's also Riverwalk improvements, roughly 2.2 million south of Washington that are being included to help with the accessibility and connectivity to this entire area, as well as I should say Main Street improvements of $1.5 million for improvements to be done on Main Street as well. Now that's not the full price tag at all for Main Street; it's just a segment of the Main Street project. Finally, through negotiations with the developer, and we don't have a final development agreement at this point, there's a contribution to the project in the form of an MRO, which is a municipal revenue obligation of $4,525,000 at an interest rate of 4.25%, which is what their borrowing rate is. What that is, an MRO, is an agreement, a contractual agreement that runs between the city and the developer that calls for revenue to come from this tax increment district only, this area, TID 15, and reimburse back out of the increment the new taxes they generate that MRO until it's paid off with interest. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. But really, what's most important, I feel like, in this structure is that the city's portion of this project, identified under the 2001 and 2003 bonds, will be paid for first and second. And then on an annual basis, if there is remaining increment in TID 15, it'll go to pay the MRO. So essentially, the developer is kind of being paid last on the deal. So let's talk a little bit about the development of what they're proposing. They have two different buildings. I think I flipped them before when I mentioned it. Building 1 is really on the north. The brewing site, I think it's called, brewery site. Building 1 would be there. Building 2 would be the southern portion where the properties are being removed, subtracted from TID number 10. What they're identifying are pretty substantial, about $35 million in new development. I'll just kind of pause for a second on this chart and let you know also that we've done, the city's contracted with Ellers to do a pretty deep dive into the developer's pro forma to make sure that we can answer the but-for question, one, but two, make sure that we're not enriching the developer in any way, that the rate of return they're getting on their internal rate of return on their investment fits within what would be the expectations for this type of development. So, while there's a substantial amount of costs identified here, and I'll go back to that project cost, this amount. This is not what they asked for. They came in with a significantly greater ask than this. And this has been kind of negotiated down to what we feel is a reasonable number. So from a cash flow perspective, the $35 million comes in. We are also showing a 0.5% appreciation, meaning the property increasing in value of 0.5% on an annual basis. And that generates about $18 million in increment. And that $18 million in increment ultimately then goes into this cash flow to be able to be fully paid back. So as I said, what I think is really important from a protection standpoint for the city is that we have the increment coming in, and that first pays the $1.5 million, and that's this first issue. That's to clean up the sites, reimbursing the developer plus the riverfront trail north of Washington. And then we actually have the second series, which is Main Street and the riverfront the trail again south of Washington. And then after those are paid on an annual basis, the developer gets reimbursed back the MRO. The reason this number is this high, 8.5 million, is because again, it's an MRO that has an interest rate assigned to it, to 4.25%. So it takes a while for that to be reimbursed back, in part because they're waiting for all these other costs to be paid for. This is security. I look at it, if the values come in a little bit less than what's projected, we don't see the appreciation. What really happens is they either get paid back slower, or they may not get the full amount back because they're waiting on the tail end of this deal. So again, it takes us quite a while to get fully reimbursed back, but we do get a lot of project costs paid for, including a portion of Main Street and the trail. Again, we had to answer the questions about annex property, portion devoted to retail, zoning, master plan, and such. And that's all built into this project plan. The last comment is we do need the list of projects or non-project eligible costs. And what we've identified is that a significant portion of the Main Street improvements and the Riverwalk improvements will fall outside of the tax increment district and have to be paid for from other sources. But everything else should be paid for and captured as a cost within the tax increment district.
Anything else, Phil,
Mayor?
for your explanation?
No, I think I'll pause there and listen for questions.
Sounds good. Well, first we'll turn to the public hearings. So I'll start with a public hearing for TID 10. This is just the amendment. So if anybody from the public would like to speak on this item, feel free to come on up. Otherwise, we're looking for a motion to end the public hearing. Thank you. Fleischman, yep. And Dolnick, and I'll note that Schmidt is abstaining. All in favor of ending the public hearing, signal by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. And then we'll have the public hearing for tax incremental district 15. If anybody from the public would like to speak on this item, feel free to come on up. Otherwise, we're looking for a motion to end that as well. Thank you. And all those in favor of ending the public hearing, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we'll open up for discussion and questions from the commission. Commissioner Dolnick, go ahead.
Two questions which are probably simplistic compared to what is in the plan, but I don't recall ever seeing this before. Maybe it's happened, but what happens to the existing buildings? What impact is on the buildings that are north of the brewery, but which aren't part of the project, but are in the TIF? Does it have any impact on them?
No, actually, the base value, the value that's there today, continues The taxing jurisdictions continue to get their share based on that valuation. The taxes are the same as, as they were before the TID was created, so it doesn't have any impact on those. It's just that if they would develop, because of the improvement in the Riverwalk, because of the development that's occurring next to it, if the value goes up on those, it's captured, and that incremental value goes to this TID to help pay for it. Or if they redevelop, they also would go, the increase would also go up and go to this TID. Essentially, if there were any improvements needed or help needed to encourage that development, then that would be under terms of another agreement. Those improvements would be permitted because there are other listed uses that we can use the money for in this project plan. So we've anticipated that. But those developments would have to pay, we'd do a similar pro forma for those to make sure that they would be self-sustaining. In other words, they would be another true pay-as-you-go development. So it doesn't have an impact on them unless they choose to do something different. It doesn't change their zoning, doesn't change their uses, doesn't impact their taxes.
And actually, TIF number 1 downtown was actually this, that encompassed existing buildings, and so it's nothing new. I just realized that. Then the other question, some concern's been expressed about the Shoemaker and Pruitt's, and we don't need to get into specifics, but I know that there are relocation considerations under the law that are made available to existing businesses.
This is not city-owned properties, so the relocation benefits that you're referring to don't apply. In this case, it's privately owned land under private leases, and I can't answer how that was handled with those individuals, but it is not the restrictions required under the TID.
We're out of that, in other words.
Correct.
Okay.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Parking, like for business commercial, are we parking on the Milwaukee River side developed, or are we parking on North Main Street side, or have they gone that far yet determining where parking will be?
Mike, I'll try to answer that. They have parking internal to their development. They have some external parking, not a huge amount. However, all of that will be subject to the site plan that you will be seeing hopefully in a month.
Okay, so
But that's not necessarily, the parking itself isn't germane to the project plan approval that we're talking about tonight.
Anybody else? Otherwise, yes, Administrator Shambo, what do you got?
Well, I just want to add that, Mark shared in regards to Commissioner Dolnick's question about the existing tenants in the building, that although there's not relocation assistance cost-wise that the city would be providing, we have met with all of the individuals, the tenants in that building, and our staff has offered to assist them in finding a new location somewhere else within West Bend. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions on either of the TIF districts? Going once, going twice. All right. Otherwise, we'll do one at a time. We're looking for a motion to approve the resolution. We'll start with TIF District 10. Thank you. Olnick and Newman. Any other questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then we'll look for a motion to approve the resolution for TIF District 15.
Motion to approve?
Thank you, Butchlick and Newman. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And Phil, are you still there? Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks for being here. All right. Move on to C, 2020 Comprehensive Plan. Number 1, discussion and recommendation to set a public hearing for a change in the recommended land use from single-family residential to two-family residential in the 2020 Comprehensive Plan for the City of West Bend for approximately 32.9 acres of land located on the north and east of Daisy Drive and Clearview Drive by the Department of Development. And I don't have the rest of that wording. Oh, that's it. All right. Jim, take it away.
Thank you. The developer, Diamond Holdings, has submitted a request to development for a consideration to change the land use plan for approximately 32.9 acres located north and east of Daisy Drive and Clearview Drive. The request is to consider the land use change from single-family residential designation to two-family residential designation. It is anticipated that this proposal would consist of a traditional two-family subdivision along Clearview Drive extended, and then also extending a planned unit development for two-family to the eastern portions of the lands, essentially just east of that Clearview Drive extended. The developer is requesting the change due to the environmental constraints of the site. The site historically has a history of high groundwater, adverse soil conditions, wetlands, and primary environmental corridor. The surrounding uses around the property consist of single-family to the west and south, open space to the north and east, and then the future land uses would be single-family to the north of this development. Given the existing uses and the proposed use of the two-family, this could be an appropriate alternative for compatibility with the single-family uses in the area. If the comprehensive plan is endorsed by the Plan Commission, eventually we would have a zoning amendment to be filed for the request from the single-family zoning, RS4 zoning, to the RD2 two-family zoning. If the Plan Commission would find the request to be acceptable, we would recommend that a public hearing be set for April 7th of 2021 to hear any concerns pertaining to the land use change. Depending if all the items are taken care of for the appropriate zoning, we may have the zoning to occur at the same time as the consideration for the land use change.
Sounds great. Any questions for Jim? Seeing none, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Just two things. I don't know that we've ever not approved or set a public hearing, so I mean, I'll go ahead with this, but I have a lot of concerns about the request. The other thing is, this area is without an alderman right now. So on their behalf, on the residents' behalf, I would ask, will the planning office, it's 200 feet, adjacent property owners within 200 feet would get a letter?
That's correct.
Correct.
Is that going to encompass, do you want to broaden that a little bit? Will that encompass all the adjacent property owners? And I mean, I'm thinking of the Sand Drive deal where we had to broaden it a little bit because of the impact. Do you want to extend that at all?
We certainly can increase include the whole subdivisions to the west. By right, the ones immediately adjacent to it are going to be recorded to the south, or noticed to the south and southwest. But we'll broaden it out to make it as indicative as we can for impact.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we're looking for a motion to set the public hearing for April 7th.
Make a motion?
Second.
For April 7th?
Thank you, Starl and Schmidt. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And having no further business before the Planning Commission, I'll adjourn by the call of the chair. Have a great night.